Meeting my ex-girlfriend's family over the holidays turned out to be the worst weekend of my life. Her name was Kaylee, and at the time, our relationship was still relatively fresh. We were both living on Long Island, New York, and her family lived all the way up in Vermont. Despite how new things were between us, she felt our connection was serious enough that her parents decided to invite us up for Christmas. She had a small family, just her parents and her brother. That was it. No aunts, no cousins, no grandparents, just the five of us. I remember the exact moment we pulled up to their place. To be honest, it was a pleasant surprise. Their house was stunning, a large, charming home nestled deep within a wide, well-kept property, completely isolated from any neighboring houses. The snow blanketing the ground gave everything a quiet, peaceful glow, and for a second, it actually felt kind of magical. Kaylee and I stepped out of my truck, our boots crunching softly in the snow. That's when her parents emerged onto the porch to greet us. First impressions? They were friendly, but in a way I couldn't quite explain. It was a kind of friendliness that immediately made my skin prickle, almost too eager. Her father didn't smile, not even a little, but he shook my hand firmly, slapped me on the back with a bit more force than I expected, and said in a flat tone, "It's great to meet you." Kaylee's mother, on the other hand, was much more expressive. She wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug, speaking in that overly warm, almost theatrical voice people use when they're trying too hard to seem welcoming. But what unsettled me most was her face. She had this wide smile, too wide. It stretched across her cheeks unnaturally, almost like it had been practiced in front of a mirror a few too many times. Her eyes stayed locked on mine a moment too long, and even after the hug, that smile never faltered. Inside, the house was just as impressive as it looked from the outside. It had that rustic wooden lodge feel, with thick timber beams lining the ceiling and warm amber lights glowing from antique fixtures. The scent of pine and something faintly sweet lingered in the air, and the hardwood floors creaked under our feet with every step. But as welcoming as the space tried to be, there was something underneath it all. Some strange, invisible weight pressing down on the air. Something about that place felt off. A little while after we settled in, Kaylee's brother, Paul, got home from work. Right away, I could tell he was different. He had this strange, standoffish energy about him. Socially awkward for sure. He barely said anything when we were introduced, just mumbled a "hey" and gave a stiff nod before walking past me into the kitchen. The guy had a full tattoo sleeve running up his arm, vivid ink of skulls and abstract designs climbing up to disappear beneath the short sleeve of his flannel shirt. And to top it all off, he had a bowl cut, an actual straight-up bowl cut. Dinner that night was tense, to say the least. We all sat around this long, rustic table beneath a dim chandelier that flickered ever so slightly. There were moments when no one spoke at all, where only the clinking of cutlery against porcelain echoed through the house. Occasionally, Kaylee's mom would try to spark some cheerful small talk, and her father would respond with a grunt or a single word. Paul barely said a thing the entire meal. He just sat there, slowly chewing, his eyes never really landing on any one thing for long, except for me. After dinner, we all moved into the living room to watch a Christmas movie. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. I tried to keep my eyes on the screen, but I could feel it. Paul staring at me. And not just once or twice, he kept doing it. Long, slow glances that lingered until they became impossible to ignore. Eventually, I gave in and looked back at him. And we locked eyes. 3 full seconds of stillness, no blinking, no shift in expression, just a direct, sharp gaze that cut through me like a blade. His face was blank, but the look in his eyes was anything but. There was judgment there, disapproval, maybe even hate. Then, without a word, he turned back to the screen. I looked away too, trying to shake it off, but my discomfort had settled deep in my gut. Something about him just didn't feel right. Later that night, Kaylee and I were in the guest room. It was a cozy space with a small window that overlooked the snow-covered yard and an attached bathroom off to the side. She had gone into the bathroom to wash up, leaving her phone on the nightstand. I wasn't planning on snooping. Honestly, I wasn't. But then her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. And for some reason, I looked. It was from her mom. And what I saw made my stomach drop. "Do you think he suspects anything yet?" That was all it said, just that single line. Then, as I stared at the screen in disbelief, the message disappeared. The preview vanished and was replaced by the generic new message banner. I realized she must have had her iMessage notifications set to hide once the phone locked. The screen dimmed and went dark a second later. I stared at the phone for a few seconds longer, my pulse beginning to quicken. My hands were slightly clammy. The air in the room suddenly felt heavier. I wanted to unlock it, to scroll up and read what came before that text, to make sense of what I had just seen. But her phone had a passcode, and I didn't know it. So I sat there, in silence, watching the shadows on the walls, the firelight from downstairs flickering faintly under the doorframe. And I started to wonder, what exactly was I not supposed to suspect? I could actually feel my heart pounding now, hard and fast in my chest, a dull thud echoing in my ears. Kaylee came back into the room a few minutes later. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mind was racing, spiraling. I barely even looked at her, and I think she noticed. I gave her the cold shoulder without meaning to, but I just couldn't shake what I saw on that phone screen. That single sentence was stuck in my head like a splinter. She didn't say much either, just sat down on the edge of the bed, pulled out her phone, and started texting for a bit. Her screen glowed softly in the dark room, lighting up her face just enough for me to see her expression. Neutral, focused, maybe too focused. Eventually, she set her phone down on the nightstand, turned off the lamp, and curled up under the blanket beside me. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, rolling from side to side for hours. My brain wouldn't shut up. What the hell did that text mean? Do you think he suspects anything yet? Was it about me? It had to be. What else could it have been referring to? And Paul, what was his deal? That stare he gave me at dinner. I couldn't get it out of my head. It was like he saw right through me and didn't like what he saw. The hours dragged by, and eventually I looked over at the clock on the nightstand. 2 a.m. on the dot. That's when I heard movement beside me. Kaylee was getting out of bed, slowly, quietly. There was a soft rustle of sheets and the faintest creak of the mattress as she slipped her legs out. Normally, I'd think nothing of it. Maybe she just needed a glass of water or a bathroom break. But under these circumstances, everything felt suspicious. I kept still, didn't move. I made my breathing slow and steady, pretending I was still asleep. I heard her bare feet whisper across the wooden floor as she walked around the bed. Then she stopped, right next to me. She stood there for a few seconds, just standing, not saying anything, not touching me, just standing there. I kept my eyes shut and focused on keeping my breathing even, every nerve in my body alert and on edge. Then, finally, she walked out of the room and disappeared into the hallway. I stayed frozen for a moment, straining my ears. A few seconds later, I heard the creak of a step. The stairs. She was heading downstairs. Her footsteps were slow and deliberately quiet, but in a silent house like this, even that was audible. Then I heard something else. Another set of footsteps, following her. And then another. 3 separate people, all descending the stairs, one after the other. I couldn't tell who it was, but it sure as hell wasn't just Kaylee. Something was happening, something they didn't want me to hear. I slid out of bed and crept over to the bedroom door, easing it open as silently as I could. The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint blue hue of moonlight filtering through a window at the far end. I moved to the top of the staircase and crouched down, listening. There were voices, several of them, coming from the dining room just off the base of the stairs. They were whispering, but not soft enough. I couldn't make out specific words, but I could hear the rhythm of their speech. Calm, quiet, intentional, not casual, not the kind of talking you do in the middle of the night with family. No, this sounded more like planning, scheming. The longer I listened, the more my skin crawled. There was this unnatural calmness to the way they spoke, like they'd done this before, like they'd rehearsed it. Something was very, very wrong. And whatever it was they were discussing down there, it was definitely about me. From the top of the stairs, I kept listening, heart pounding in my throat. And then I heard Kaylee's voice. She said something low, but I caught a fragment of it. When I go back up, you stand by the door. I froze. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. Then I heard her brother respond, his voice quieter, more mumbled. I couldn't make out the exact words, but it didn't matter. What was happening? It was finally clicking, crashing down on me like a wave. Or at least, I thought I knew what was happening, and whatever it wasn't good. Without wasting another second, I backed away from the stairs and slipped silently back into the guest room. I had to leave. Now. I didn't care if it was 2 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, Vermont. I wasn't staying another second in that house. I grabbed my duffel bag and yanked my coat off the back of the chair. My hands were shaking as I reached for my keys on the nightstand. But just as my fingers closed around them, something caught the corner of my eye. A shape in the corner of the room. My head snapped toward it, and I instinctively reached for the lamp. The room flooded with warm light. And that's when I saw him, Kaylee's dad, sitting in a wooden chair in the corner of the room, in complete silence. He hadn't made a sound, hadn't moved, just sat there, staring at me. His face was expressionless, glassy eyes behind thick lenses, his mouth resting in a flat line. It was like he'd been there the whole time, just watching. A cold wave of terror surged through me. I screamed. Not once, not twice. I screamed 4 times, each one more frantic than the last. "You're all crazy!" I yelled, backing toward the door. "You're all fucking crazy!" I didn't even care if I left stuff behind. I bolted from that room, down the hallway, down the stairs, and through the front door, not once looking back. The cold slapped me across the face as I sprinted across the snow to my truck. I jumped in, jammed the key into the ignition with trembling hands, and turned it. The engine groaned to life, and before it was even fully started, I slammed the gear shift into drive and floored it, spitting gravel behind me as I tore down that long, tree-lined driveway and back toward the road. I didn't stop once, not even to breathe. Not until I needed gas. At some lonely 24-hour station off the highway, I finally pulled in, my hands still shaking as I filled up the tank under the flickering lights of the pump canopy. It was only then that I dared to check my phone. One new message. It was from Kaylee. What the F happened? I stared at the screen for a while, just staring. I didn't answer. Not right away. Only when I was home, hours later, safe behind locked doors, did I finally reply. I wrote, "I don't know what you and your sick family were planning on doing to me. I don't want to know. Don't ever contact me or come near me again, and I won't report this." It was the only message I sent. I wrote it because I knew I didn't have any proof, nothing solid, nothing that would hold up. But I meant every word. She never replied, and I never heard from any of them again. It was Christmas Eve, late, 1 in the morning, and I was still up, alone in the den, watching TV. I always stay up extra late on Christmas Eve. There's just something about the stillness, the quiet, the soft lights, makes the whole night feel more festive, more comforting, like holding on to a moment you don't want to end. Outside, a snowstorm was sweeping through the area. Thick flakes drifted lazily down from the sky, covering everything in a soft, glowing white. I had cracked the window open slightly, just enough to let in that crisp winter air. The cold breeze brushed against my face now and then, a reminder that it really was Christmas Eve. I had also turned on the backyard light, mostly because I liked being able to see the snow piling up on the lawn, the trees, and the deck. It gave the whole room this dreamy, peaceful feeling. At that moment, I was focused on the TV, half lost in the glow of the screen. But then, something shifted in my peripheral vision. A flicker, movement. Just for a second. I turned toward the window, eyes narrowing. But no, there was nothing there. Just the steady stream of snow falling under the pale backyard light, silent and undisturbed. Still, Something in me stirred. That small, uneasy part of your brain that whispers, double check. So I got up from the couch and walked over to the window, leaning in slightly. Nothing. The yard was empty. The snow was untouched. The trees stood still in the windless dark. I let out a breath and went back to the couch, feeling a little silly. But now I couldn't stop checking the window. Every few minutes I'd glance over just to make sure. I told myself I was being paranoid, but still I couldn't help it. My eyes kept darting back to that patch of white just beyond the glass. 10 minutes passed. The movie sucked me back in. I relaxed, forgot about the window, stopped checking every 5 seconds. And then, bang! A sharp, metallic slam rang out from outside. The backyard date, loud and clear. My body went cold. I sat frozen for a few seconds, trying to process what I just heard, trying to convince myself it was nothing. The wind, maybe, or the latch slipping loose. But no, something about that sound told me it wasn't the wind. That gate had slammed shut, like someone had just walked through it. I jumped up, heart pounding now, and quickly slipped on my shoes and jacket. My hands were trembling just a little as I opened the back door. The cold hit me like a wall. The snow crunched beneath my shoes as I stepped out. The yard was eerily quiet. The only sound was the soft hiss of snow hitting the ground. But then I saw them. Footprints. Fresh ones. They started at the gate on one side of the yard, crossed directly through the center, and ended at the gate on the other side. Whoever it was, they'd passed through the yard recently. I stood there in the snow, eyes darting between the two gates, heart racing faster with every second. Something about those prints didn't feel right. They were too deliberate. I followed them with my eyes, but not with my feet. I wasn't feeling brave enough for that. Instead, I turned around, stepped back inside, and locked the door behind me. Whatever had just walked through my yard in the middle of a snowstorm at 1 a.m. on Christmas Eve, I didn't want to find out. As I stepped back inside, I bent down to take off my boots and peel off my jacket, still shaken by the footprints outside. The cold air clung to me, refusing to let go. That's when I noticed it. Tracks. A line of wet, muddy snow smeared across the den carpet. Clear boot prints leading from the office into the hallway. The hallway that led directly to the living room. And to my parents' bedroom. My chest tightened. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat. I stared at the tracks, trying to understand what I was seeing, trying to convince myself they were mine. But they weren't. I hadn't come in through that way, and I hadn't been anywhere near the office. Whoever left those footprints had come from inside the house. First, I had to check the office. I had to see how the hell they'd gotten in. I moved slowly, deliberately, careful not to step on the tracks themselves. I didn't turn on any lights. My gut told me not to give away that I was awake and moving around. The only illumination came from the soft glow of the snow outside, filtering through the windows. It made the house even more silent, even more vulnerable. I reached the office and slipped through the doorway. My eyes scanned the room. I half expected a shattered window, curtains flapping in the breeze, but everything was intact. Not a single thing out of place. Then something hit me. The boot prints, they didn't start in this room. They ended here. I turned slowly toward the far corner of the office, toward the door that led to the garage. It was open. Just a few inches, but open. The light in the garage was off. It was pitch black past the threshold, but even in that darkness, I could make out a shape. Someone was there, squatting low, directly under the garage doorway, wearing a heavy winter coat, jeans, and snow-covered boots. Their back was facing me, body hunched as if trying to stay hidden, but their head was turned around just enough so that one eye could look directly at me. And they were looking right at me. My body went cold. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mouth falling open, my breath catching in my throat. That eye, staring at me over the curve of their shoulder, was wide and lifeless. No expression, no panic, just watching. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe a few seconds, maybe less. Then my body kicked into motion. I turned and ran, bolting down the hallway and screaming the entire way to my parents' room. My voice was shaking, rising into a full-blown panic as I pounded on their door. "Dad, someone's in the house!" He was up in seconds, disoriented but alert. I barely gave him time to throw on a robe before we both rushed down the hall together. And just as we reached the kitchen, "Rrr, rrr," the garage door started to open. That deep, mechanical whine echoed through the house, rising above the sound of our footsteps. By the time we made it back to the office and through the door to the garage, the intruder was gone, vanished. The cold air poured in through the open garage, and snowflakes were already swirling inside. He'd escaped. Realistically, we could have followed his boot prints through the snow, tried to chase him down, but who knows how far he'd gotten by that point or what he was capable of. Later, we figured out how he got in. One of the living room windows, left unlocked. That was all it took. And that's the thing. If someone truly wants to break into your home, they'll find a way. Which is why you should never take chances. Lock every door, every window, every single time. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. At the time of this story, I was 16. My little sister was 11, and my 2 younger brothers were 8 and 7. We'd always been close, but being the oldest meant I was usually the one watching over them, especially at big events like this. My parents, and by extension our whole family, were part of this exclusive club. You know the type. Rich, uptight, and absolutely convinced they were better than everyone else. It was basically a social circle for wealthy, snobby adults who liked to drink overpriced wine and talk about second homes. Every December, the club hosted a big Christmas party at this fancy old firehouse they'd converted into an event space. And like clockwork, every year, the night included someone dressing up as Santa Claus to hand out presents to all the kids, mostly people's sons and daughters, like my siblings and me. They always made a whole production out of it. There was this big wooden chair in front of the fireplace, draped with a red blanket, and a large sack of gifts placed right beside it. The presents were prearranged by the parents, each one tagged with a name. This year, my dad's best friend Michael had volunteered to play Santa. He was sitting with us at our table, laughing, drinking, casually joking around. So when it was time for Santa's grand entrance, I saw him quietly stand up, nod at my dad, and slip out the door to go get changed. There were probably 20 kids there, all running around the room. They didn't even notice him leave. Everyone else, adults included, was too busy chatting, sipping wine, or laughing at some story. The place had a warm, golden glow to it from the hanging lights and flickering fireplace, and the laughter and chatter echoed through the tall ceilings. It was festive, cheerful, normal. Then, about 10 minutes later, the firehouse door creaked open, and we all heard it. Jingle bells. All the kids immediately froze for a split second, then erupted in squeals and cheers. "Santa!" they all screamed in unison, scrambling to the center of the room in a frenzy of excitement. And then, in he came. Michael, or rather Santa Claus, stepped through the door. Though, to be honest, it was hard to feel any of the usual magic. His costume looked cheap, really cheap, like something you'd pick up last minute from the clearance rack at a party city. The beard was too thin, the suit wrinkled and shapeless, the boots didn't match. It was a serious downgrade from last year's Santa, who actually looked like he stepped out of a Macy's window display. This Santa, though, he looked like someone barely trying. And something about that stuck in the back of my mind, just a small, prickling discomfort I couldn't quite explain. The hat and beard were passable, sure, but the rest of the costume, it just looked off. The fabric hung loose, cheap, and flimsy, not at all like the high-quality suit the club usually provided for the Santa gig. The belt looked like plastic, the boots didn't match, and the jacket bunched up around the sleeves like it hadn't even been fitted properly. Still, the guy chuckled and launched into his best Santa impression. And I had to admit, he nailed the voice. Deep, jolly, cheerful, almost theatrical. It didn't sound anything like Michael, but I figured maybe he was just that committed to the role. I mean, if nothing else, he was really selling it. As he ho-ho-hoed and interacted with the kids, I caught a few of my parents' friends glancing at each other, whispering. Their smiles faltered just a little, and their brows furrowed. Something about it didn't sit right with them either. Then Santa reached down, grabbed the sack of presents sitting by the red blanketed chair, and turned to the room. "I'll be right back with the rest of the gifts," he said, his voice still pitch perfect, booming with cheer. And just like that, he walked out the firehouse door. But before it even closed behind him, I saw my dad and 2 other men spring to their feet and bolt after him, shouting, "Hey!" The tension snapped instantly. I sat there, stunned, unsure of what just happened. I didn't understand. Not until my mom leaned toward me, her voice low but urgent. "That wasn't Michael," she said. I blinked. What? That wasn't him. That man wasn't Michael. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I think I wanted to feel important in that moment, or maybe I just wanted to do something, so I rushed outside too, hurrying through the lobby and pushing the door open into the freezing night. The parking lot was mostly empty, lit by a few tall lampposts that cast long shadows over the snow-dusted asphalt. I found my dad and the two other guys standing near the edge of the lot, turning in slow circles, looking around like they couldn't believe what had just happened. The man in the Santa suit, whoever he was already gone. No sign of him, vanished into the night. But what had them really concerned wasn't just that some random stranger had shown up and pretended to be Michael. It was that they had no idea where Michael actually was. And his car? Gone too. I asked them again, "Are you sure that wasn't Michael?" They were all certain, every single one of them. "That wasn't him," my dad said, shaking his head. "Not even close." We tried calling him right away. His cell rang once, then went straight to voicemail. We called again, same thing. After a while, we tried his landline at home, just in case. Voicemail again. No one had seen or heard from him. Panic started setting in. They organized a search party, checked the firehouse grounds, the road, even the surrounding woods, but there was no sign of him. No footsteps, no car tracks, nothing that told us where he went or how. It was like both he and the man in the Santa suit had simply disappeared. Eventually, my dad and I gave up the search and returned to the firehouse to pick up my mom and siblings. By that point, the party had mostly cleared out. Just about everyone had gone home, their cheerful evening shattered by confusion and unease. I stepped outside to wait by the car while my parents gathered my brothers and sister inside. The cold night pressed in around me, still, quiet, and heavy with snow. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint and distant, carried on the wind. A scream. Not a loud, panicked shriek, but a cry for help, weak, desperate. It was coming from the woods, deep in the woods. My stomach flipped. I ran toward the tree line, the snow crunching under my shoes, and cupped my hands around my mouth. "Michael!" The name echoed through the stillness. A second later, the same voice called back, "Help!" It was him. It was Michael. There was no time to think. I should have gone back for my dad, but I didn't. I was too caught up in the rush, the fear, the adrenaline, the thrill of hearing his voice, of knowing he was alive. I crossed the tree line and plunged into the woods, the trees closing in around me like silent sentinels. The snow was deeper here, and the cold bit harder. I followed the sound of his voice, weaving between the trunks, dodging low-hanging branches, eyes darting around in the darkness. And then I saw him, Michael, tied to a tree. His face was a bloody mess. Fresh blood streaked down from his forehead, trailing over his cheek and dripping onto his jacket. His skin was pale and slick with sweat, and his breathing was shallow, ragged. He looked like he'd been hit in the head hard, over and over. The rope around his wrists was thin and fraying. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking, and used one to saw at the rope until it finally snapped. He slumped forward, barely able to stand. I wrapped his arm over my shoulders and helped him to his feet. He staggered with every step, but we managed to make it out of the woods together, back toward the firehouse parking lot. That's when he saw it. His car, Gone. Michael stopped in his tracks and let out a strained, guttural scream. His car, a brand new $50,000 vehicle, had been stolen. And finally, between heavy breaths and winces of pain, he told me what happened. When he'd left the building to change into the Santa costume, he'd been ambushed. 3 men, all wearing masks. One of them came at him from behind and smashed something heavy and metal into his head, again and again. He said he barely had time to react before the world went black. The next thing he remembered was waking up tied to that tree, his head pounding, his body aching, the freezing cold sinking into his skin. It's sickening to think about. That 3 or maybe even 4 grown men had planned this, planned it. They'd hurt him, nearly killed him, all to pull off a heist for a bunch of wrapped Christmas gifts. Some of them were high-end, sure, expensive electronics, designer toys, things like that. But still, children's presents. And to add insult to injury, they'd taken his car, too. I felt horrible for him. I still do. It's not the kind of story Michael brings up casually, not something he can just laugh about at a party or turn into a holiday anecdote. It's still raw, still painful, even for me. I was just 16 when it happened, and I'll never forget the look on his face, tied to that tree, blood dripping down his face in the middle of the woods on Christmas Eve. Some scars don't fade.